Morty up to 6 seasons? How is Rick and Morty doing it?
Fuck.
Oh. Yeah. Hello all, and welcome back to Cartoon Galaxy Rant, where I like to rant about, well, cartoons. As if that wasn't obvious enough from the title screen, am I right? But let's just cut to the chase, shall we? Being that we have finally finished our last episode of Season 6 of Rick and Morty some weeks ago, I really thought it was time to talk about the show as a whole, and how it doesn't feel like it's been the same quality as it used to. Now, I know some people still really enjoy it, but you have to admit, it just isn't the same. A lot of other cartoon reviewers have briefly mentioned this, though the main focus has been, well, I can't say the word lest YouTube take this video down. Let's just say it starts with an I, and I'll just phrase it this way. Inappropriate family relations. I think that works. Yeah, not a good sign when a show's punchlines center around that. And way too frequently. Counting, I'd say maybe 3 to 4 episodes in the last 2 seasons. Sheesh. But I do believe this is a symptom of a greater issue, resulting in the show's failure to create episodes that used to be, in my opinion, more hilarious, fun, and interesting. So, in this video, I'm going to be tackling how I feel the quality of Rick and Morty isn't what it used to be, and what I think might be the causes. But before I can dive into this messy situation, let's talk about what made Rick and Morty so freaking awesome in its early years. Rick and Morty. Did I ever tell you how much I love this show? Originally, I'll admit, it didn't grab me. I remember watching the end of the last episode of Season 1 back in Massachusetts and thinking, what the hell is this? But then I watched it again, seeing some of the episodes from Season 2, including the memorable last episode from that season, and my god, that cliffhanger-ish ending, it had me yearning for more of this show. And now I could proudly say I've watched every episode to date, bought my fair share of Rick and Morty crap, and made a shit ton of fan art and animations to fill my need for more Rick and Morty. I even read some of their comics, which you should definitely check out. They're actually pretty good. So, how did this show come to be? Well, the origin of Rick and Morty stems back to one of its creators, Justin Roiland, and Channel 101, which had participants air their short films. Since Justin was already a producer of Channel 101, he started submitting his content for the show. Stuff that was made to shock and confuse his audiences in a sort of sick and twisted way. Dan Harmon, who is the co-founder of Channel 101, had a liking to Justin's work and decided to start collaborating with him. Around this time, or somewhere after the fact, around 2006, Justin created a new series of shorts that would be a webisode for Channel 101. The title of this webisode was The Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty. This series was pretty much the predecessor to Rick and Morty, a series spoofing Doc Brown and Marty McFly from the classic film Back to the Future. Each episode, I'll admit, is pretty risque, though if you decide to watch them, do it at your own risk. Let's just say it involves some inappropriate acts of a phallic nature, which once again I can't explain in full detail on this platform. Not that I would want to be honest, but yeah. Watch if you dare. Mind you, these clips are nowhere similar to the Rick and Morty show, besides that the characters' designs, well, they're like the ones we know, but just more messy looking. Uneven lines, things like that. And of course, Justin did the voices for the characters, just as he continues to do now. During this time, Justin also did some voice work for shows like Adventure Time, and Harmon was the creator and producer of the show Community, and would later be kicked off the show for reasons that we will be talking about and will be much more relevant for later. Trust me on this one. The Rick and Morty show we are the most familiar with aired on December 2nd of 2013 on Adult Swim. Damn, it feels like yesterday since it aired. God, I'm old. Anyway, it was created by Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon. The whole process started with Dan giving Justin a call to see if he had any ideas for an animated series. And of course, Justin suggested, you guessed it, Doc and Marty, but with a few changes. Thus, the show was pitched and born. But what makes the show so good? Why is it that myself and so many others fell in love with it? Well, the way I look at it, there are 3 factors at play that make this show an entertaining masterpiece. So here we go. 1, who the characters are and how they have grown through the series. 2, the worlds, the creatures, and the zany stories centered around our characters. And 3, the unique style of humor that's used in the show. Now bear in mind, as I start to jump into these details, and you haven't watched Rick and Morty yet, I'd recommend not watching any more of this video, or else you might be spoiled. As for season 6 spoilers, that will be much later in the video, so you can continue watching. And don't worry, I'll provide a second warning when that part of the video starts drawing near. Okay, so let's start. Now, the 2 main characters, if you hadn't guessed already, are Rick and Morty. Rick Sanchez is a drunken, maddish scientist who has a pretty pessimistic view on things and will enjoy a good time if it means escaping some deeper pain that we are unaware of until much later in the show. He is also not afraid to speak his mind, even if he may come off as an asshole to his entire family. And he has a ridiculously negative view of authority. His grandson, Morty Smith, on the other hand, is the complete opposite of his grandfather. He is not as outspoken and stutters as he speaks. When he's told to do things, most times by Rick, who basically uses his grandson as a guinea pig on all their adventures, Morty will reluctantly do as he says. For some reason, despite Rick's flaws, Morty trusts his grandfather as the intelligent scientist he is, even if this means missing school and not getting to be just a regular teenager. Morty does, however, stand up to Rick a little, persisting to go on his own adventures at times, and has even asked Rick to use his science to help him in situations like make a girl he likes like him back, which unfortunately ends in a literal world-ending disaster. There are other characters as well, such as Rick and Morty's family. There is Beth, who is Morty's mother and Rick's daughter, Jerry, Morty's father, whom Rick despises with every fiber of his being, and Morty's older sister, Summer, who also has a striking resemblance in terms of personality to her grandfather, but if you put that personality in a preppy, modern-age teenage girl. And Summer does go on some adventures with Rick, sometimes when Morty is not around. Hell, even other members of the family start to share an adventure with Rick as the show goes on. And there are other characters that we meet along the way, and as a matter of fact, make recurring appearances. Some of these characters, for example, are Mr. Poopy Butthole and Bird Person. Now, just from the summary alone, you can already see there is a lot to these characters. They have diverse personalities, which sometimes meld and clash with each other, depending on the situation they are in. I think one of the best examples is the episode Total Recall, which is by far one of my favorites. In a previous episode, Rick carelessly throws something out containing alien parasites, and then it starts infecting the household. These parasites have the ability to look like random characters and twist their host's psyche into thinking that these characters are someone from their memory. For example, Summer recalls seeing this cute unicorn fairy thing called Tinkles. Jerry and Beth recall memories of a character named Sleepy Gary. Beth remembers him as being her husband, and Jerry remembers having a secret romantic relationship with him behind Beth's back. Rick is the only one seeing past the facade through this entire episode, trying to keep the parasites from leaving the household while trying to keep his family's minds focused on the threat, even though he himself starts losing track of the chaos all around him. A chaos which he let into the house in the first place. There is a point where Morty is convinced that Rick is a parasite and is even about to kill his own grandfather, but doesn't when he comes to the realization that the parasites create happy memories, which Morty has no happy memories of his grandfather whatsoever. This thought alone gives the family ammunition to hunt down the parasites and wipe them all out as a team. Just from this episode, we could see the characters for who they are. We see the girly yet cynical side of Summer as she has fond memories of a cute fairy unicorn to eventually having absolutely no remorse when killing it in cold blood. We get a glimpse of the failing marriage of Jerry and Beth when Beth doesn't recognize Jerry as her own husband and sees this parasite, Sleepy Gary, as her spouse, while Jerry is just as isolated from his marriage by having a relationship with Sleepy Gary. We also see Jerry as the selfish individual he could be by having no consideration for Beth when he is sleeping around with her pretend husband. Rick is somewhat sensible in this story, but he does lose control, showing that even as smart as he is prone to errors. Moreover, it shows his carelessness when he himself brought the parasites into the house in the first place, and doesn't even take blame for this mistake. Instead, blames it on everyone else. And we get a perfect view of Morty's image of his grandfather, seeing him as an unlikable individual and having no happy memories of him whatsoever. Oh, and we are also introduced to Mr. Poopy Butthole for the first time, so that's really cool too. And our beloved characters don't stay stagnant. They grow a little as the series goes on. That, or we learn some new unique things about them. Morty, for example, starts to show more of a disliking to his grandfather, even calling him out at the end of season 2 for abandoning the family in the past and deciding to leave them again. This is also touched upon and explained in more detail in later seasons. Even in season 5, we start to see Morty going on adventures less with his grandfather and doing more on his own, which I can only assume is a result of his feelings towards Rick, even though it isn't really pressed upon too much. Morty is more outspoken and can handle himself now in tough situations without his grandfather's aid. We see Beth as the typical housewife that is unhappy in her marriage and finds drinking at times to be the solution to her stress and aggravation. She eventually leaves Jerry in hopes of finding happiness, although seems to cling to her father Rick to, I suppose, fill that void of happiness or this sense of abandonment when Rick had left her and the family long ago. It goes so far to the point that her discontentment causes her to consider abandoning her own family as Rick did and leave a clone behind to take her place. To this day, we still don't know if the Beth we see is the clone or actually her. Same goes for this more badass, sassy space version of Beth we are introduced to at the end of season 5. Jerry is about the same. So really no difference much in Jerry, but there are times he does surprise us, saving the family, if not sometimes accidentally. I figure his lack of growth is more due to Rick pushing him down and making him less the man he could potentially be, like in one of the alternate universes where Jerry does develop into a kick-ass character in an Armageddon world. Rick doesn't really change, but we do learn more about him, so our understanding of who he is what really grows. Originally, we see him as uncaring and selfish. However, there are many times he shows how much he does love his family, including Morty, while trying to sacrifice himself at the end of season 2 to protect them. There's even an instance where he murders Mr. or King Jellybean in episode 5 of season 1 And he does this because Mr. Jellybean tries to assault Morty. And Rick's backstory is eventually revealed in season 5, so we also do get a whole lot in terms of why he is so cynical about everything. Summer being last, she is the only character, to be honest, that I feel really hasn't changed at all. She just stays the same. I mean, maybe there could be some slight changes, and if you guys want to point out some, you could put it in the comments, but unlike the other characters, she doesn't really change very much. Yeah, I'd say she's been the same probably since season 1. Now, after saying a mouthful about the characters, this leads me to the second thing that makes this show so great: the worlds and the creatures. The minor characters, design-wise, name-wise, and description-wise, are very interesting and creative. You got the Meeseeks, who are kind of like genies, but grant a wish and then die, which leads to a gag of them yearning for death when they are unable to grant Jerry's wish. And then you have the Gazorpazorps, where the women are in charge and create these sex dolls for the males as a means of procreation. There are the Cromulans, that are just these floating heads that place planets on some kind of American Idol type show, and the losers get their planets destroyed. And need I forget Interdimensional Cable? Okay, it's not a character, but the premise is really creative. Basically, TV shows from other dimensions that are improvised by Justin Roiland. These episodes from Interdimensional Cable, they make up the central part of the show while having some other crazy crap happening in the background. Pure genius. Now, this ties into the last thing that makes this show so great: the humor. Now, I know a lot of folks will usually say Rick and Morty has a very smart kind of humor, and that's what makes it so great, but I'd have to disagree there. Smart humor to me feels like what you'd see in a comic strip in, I don't know, the New York Times. It'll get a chuckle out of you, maybe, if sometimes you could even get it, but it's not laugh out loud stuff. Rick and Morty is, though. It is laugh out loud stuff. How is this so? Well, first off, it's well-written adult humor and gags. For example, let's look at the robot that has only the purpose of serving butter, and then coming to the realization of this and is bummed out he has no greater purpose, just bringing you butter. Only an adult could relate to that and find it funny. And it's pretty funny, in a depressing sort of way, but it's funny. And take this element with something I had mentioned earlier, that is Justin's sort of MO, if you want to put it that way. Being shocking. But not shocking like in his old webisodes, because they probably couldn't have been aired on TV if that was the case. Rick and Morty is more shocking in how childish and immature it could be at times. I mean, come on. There is a character named Mr. Poopy Butthole. And how about when Rick and Morty sing about being swifty and floor? Or how about when Rick tells Morty to smuggle some huge seeds by putting it way up into his butthole? I mean, that scene is already shocking on its own, but to phrase it in that way, put them
way up inside your butthole, Morty.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But now, the major question: where did it all go wrong? So, after 6 seasons, when did things start feeling less like itself? I'll be honest, I loved season 1 through 3, and season 4 was pretty good too. I feel like the show really started to slip during season 5, but season 6, oh man, that season was hard for me. Out of all the episodes, I only liked one. That's right, just one. And that was the episode with the Knight family. And, okay, maybe I'm just being picky, but yeah, the other episodes just didn't feel as good to me, or they were more like Yeah, like, there were some good parts, and then there were just, I don't know, some kind of parts. It felt like something was lacking. And what? I mean, like, what is lacking? That's the thing I want to really talk about. So before I get into it, here is my second warning on spoilers. Because in this part of the video, I will be talking about season 6. So if you want to skip this part, just go to the time that I posted below this video. Okay, so let's start. All right, so remember how I talked about the 3 key things that made the show great? Well, let's just say each of these factors feel way off. Let's start actually with the humor. So remember how I said that people considered Rick and Morty to be smart humor? I feel as though the writers took this to their heads. Let's look at the episode Never Rick and Morty from season 5. Rick and Morty are stuck on a train and get involved in various narratives controlled by a new character known as the Story Lord. Now, probably some folks like this episode, but I'm gonna be honest, I did not. I actually might have even hated this episode. It just wasn't really very entertaining for me. There were so many things going on and all around this Story Lord plot. Not to mention, there were a lot of complexities that Rick explains to clarify what's going on, and it just makes your head want to explode. I get the idea of the episode in a broad sense, but when you have to understand the plot while also being thrown all this additional information that just feels like filler, it becomes more like a homework assignment than entertainment. And then they brought Story Lord back in season 6. And all I have to say is I'm glad he died, and I hope he doesn't come back, because I do not like the Story Lord episodes. Granted, the season 6 Story Lord episode was a bit better than the season 5 one, but it just still, goodbye Story Lord, no more Story Lord, I can't. He sucks, and his episodes suck. Another issue with this episode, and so many others, is also pacing. Actually, the first episode of season 6 was the biggest culprit of poor pacing, going from being rescued from Space Beth to then everyone splits up into their original dimensions. So the episode is divided into these different worlds. Rick then has his urge to find Rick Prime, the Rick who killed his wife. Then they all return to Dimension 131, where Jerry unleashes a parasite called Mr. Frundles, and Mr. Frundles takes over the world, and the family is forced to go to another dimension and make it their new home. And then that's it, and then that's the end of the episode. And yes, that was an entire episode, which could have literally been made into like 2 or 3 separate episodes. There was just so much going on in such a short period of time. Also, I'd like to return to the use of the immature humor, because although it is essential to Rick and Morty writing, the writers literally took this approach and amped it up to 11. Like, in the episode where Morty's sperm attacks the world, that was just overdoing the shocking childish humor that normally would have worked. Why doesn't it work here? Well, because in the earlier seasons, the shocking humor was sprinkled around and balanced itself with the regular adult humor. But then, in the Morty sperm episode, it makes up the entire plot. At that point, it just feels kind of just stupid. It just feels dumb. This is even the case with the episode where Jerry gets a fortune cookie that tells him he is going to sleep with his own mother. It makes up the entire plot line of the show, and it is completely uncomfortable to watch. So I understand entirely when other reviewers and folks are just fed up with this kind of theme being used in some of these episodes. I mean, I've heard of having shocking elements in a TV show, but this was just far from inappropriate. Now, let's dive into the characters. Between season 5 and 6, I felt there was a very few areas of character development. Besides that, we learn about Rick's past at the end of season 5, as well as finally having something of a conclusion to the Evil Morty story. But other than that, there hasn't been much else. Beth has actually become more unlikable, especially the space version of herself, who just seems to be there for the sake of being there. Like most episodes, she really doesn't do much. There was one episode in season 6 where Space Beth and regular Beth have an intimate relationship with each other. Another stupid and uncomfortable episode. But that's really it. I mean, how vain can you be to want to have a relationship with yourself? And there was so much more potential for Space Beth. I was actually looking forward to seeing her more and seeing what cool crap she might do with Rick or something else. But nope, just having fun time with yourself, I guess. And Morty, he was, in my opinion, he was the one most developed character. I thought, honestly, they would do more with him, especially after season 5, when there was that revelation about Rick, when we finally got to know more about Rick's past. And Morty got to know more about Rick's past. I mean, Morty isn't bitter that his grandfather never told him all about his crazy stuff from his past. Like, it just doesn't faze him at all. Just such a missed opportunity on character development. And don't get me started on Rick. He's still about the same, but he's made to be too perfect at times. I actually feel like they're trying to make him too perfect. I don't want to say Mary Sue perfect, because he still does have some flaws, but he's getting there. In earlier seasons, Rick was a smart scientist with many capabilities, but was countlessly prone to mistakes, especially due to his own carelessness. However, in later seasons, he hardly makes many mistakes and always has a quick solution, as he is the one to just know everything because he's the scientist, I guess. Hell, he even compares himself to a god, and I believe it was in the episode with the dinosaurs coming back to Earth. He even fights a god, and this was in season 4. He gets his ass kicked, but he's still able to hold his own to a god. And I know Rick has been known to have robotic limbs at times, but it's become way more pronounced to the point that you could just call him the new freaking Inspector Gadget. It was fun for a little while, but now it's like he's almost indestructible because, like, he's more robot than man, I guess. So, yeah, these are just some of the things that I've noticed in the show that just don't feel right, and I feel as though the show is way off track from where it originally was. Now let's get into the source of the problem. So, why are we seeing some unsatisfactory changes to Rick and Morty? Keep in mind, these are just theories of mine based on what I've researched and witnessed from the show's run. Now, I noticed a lot of blame comes on to Dan Harmon, and I can understand why, as Dan Harmon does seem to be the leader in all the writing work for the show. In fact, the writing process is centered around his story circle, or as he likes to call it, his embryo. And if this is his process in previous seasons, it has worked phenomenally, but it is a very extensive process. It consists of 8 layers, and these are the 8 layers. 1, our character is in a zone of comfort. 2, but they want something. 3, they enter an unfamiliar situation to pursue what they want. 4, they adapt to their new uncomfortable situation. 5, then they get what they want. 6, but they must pay a heavy price to get it. 7, with this, they return to their familiar situation. 8, and most importantly, they have changed. They have grown as a character from their experiences from the show. And we can definitely see how this process plays out in most episodes. So let's look at my favorite episode again, Total Recall. And let's see how the story circle plays in this episode. So the Smiths are in a comfortable situation, having dinner with Jerry's brother, only to find it is not his brother, but a parasite, and that the house might be infected. They want to get rid of the parasites and keep them from escaping the house. With this, they are in a dangerous and unfamiliar situation. Obviously, and fairly enough, getting nervous that they are in a house with parasites. But they adapt to the situation, eventually forgetting about the parasites and mingling with them to the point they take they, being the parasites, take over the household. Eventually, the Smiths and Rick get what they want by realizing the parasite's weakness, and now they can destroy them. However, it comes with a price. Morty having to recall how much his memories with Rick are unhappy ones, and their relationship is crap. They destroy the parasites, and everything goes back to the familiar. However, there is a character change. Mr. Poopy Butthole, a new and unfamiliar character to the Smiths, still remains, and Beth, now untrusting of him, shoots Mr. Poopy Butthole to horrifyingly find he is not a parasite and has in fact been a long family friend. The experiences the family had dealt with in the entirety of the episode had changed Beth's perspective to seeing anyone now who has only happy memories with the family can in fact be a threat, and then only to find this to be untrue, because even though she doesn't have any unhappy memories with Mr. Poopy Butthole, he wasn't a parasite. And unfortunately, this severs her relationship with Mr. Poopy Butthole. Now let's see if this strategy plays out in one of the episodes of Season 6. Let's look at the first episode of that season, shall we? So, Rick and Morty are saved by Space Beth, putting them into an area of comfort. Okay, that works. Rick wants to fix his portal gun, which was damaged during their confrontation with Evil Morty in Season 5. In doing so, the portal gun doesn't work as it should and sends the entire family into an unfamiliar and uncomfortable territory, going into their original, back into their original dimensions. They want to return back. Now, this is where the story circle gets a little jumbled, because in between all of this, a new want comes up, which kind of brings us back to the beginning of the circle. This desire is that Rick wants to find Rick Prime and has to be persuaded by Morty to let it go. Now, I'm not sure if the heavy price is Rick letting go of his desire to hunt Rick Prime, or that the world gets destroyed by Mr. Frundles, but that happens. And the only way the family returns to the familiar is entering a new dimension and making it their new home. Now, as for gaining what they wanted, this is where it gets a little confusing. I'm not sure if the original want was Rick fixing his portal gun, which never happened, or the want to return home, which also kind of did not happen. And this desire to return home was after the unfamiliar happens, which puts the circle totally out of order. As for changes, I honestly don't think the characters changed. Just maybe Rick's new goal to find Rick Prime, but I wouldn't say that is considered growth of any kind. Maybe Morty's experience has impacted him, seeing the effect he had on his old universe. So I guess maybe Morty changed a little bit. But other than that, how did he grow? Did this experience impact his character in later episodes? To be honest, I didn't see that impact. He's still the same Morty. So where's the change? Now, here's why I see the story circle may be failing. Because it is such a complicated process, it requires a lot of time. During the original season of Rick and Morty, a new season would not come out after a few years. And if you are a fan like myself, who grew up with the show, you probably remember that waiting for a new season of Rick and Morty took a bit of time. And this was only because, and I believe this to be the case, was that the Rick and Morty staff needed the okay from Adult Swim for a new season. So this would take, maybe a couple years. Either that or Adult Swim was kind enough to give them the time, but they had more time. And this gave them enough time to use the story circle and come up with stories. However, I'd say after season 3 or 4, I believe, Rick and Morty has actually been out every year now, limiting the time to use this complex process. And I feel like this is making the stories more rushed and jumbled. You can also figure with this that there may even be a sign of creative fatigue. I don't really have any proof of that, but I do know that when it comes to writing or creating any form of artwork, when you are doing it for a while, and especially when there are time constraints, it can create a form of creative fatigue. The signs are all there, and Dan Harmon's past definitely shows he is not the most dependable creative when it comes to writing stories, so that is another thing. Now, I can finally return to his time on Community, which I talked about at the very beginning of the video. So Community was a show he created and was also ironically fired from, which is pretty rare for somebody to be fired from a show that they created. But the reasons Dan Harmon was fired from the show was actually due to many instances of misconduct. Although Harmon thinks it was other reasons, so I don't know. But from what I've read, it was issues with misconduct. He would write last-minute pieces, which would lengthen shooting hours. Also, being a heavy drinker, he was not much fun to be around. There was even an instance where he harassed one of his writers. Now, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes of Rick and Morty, but if it is any bit similar to Community, I could see where the writing could be, deteriorating because maybe there is a stressful environment behind all this. And as you may know, stressful environments do not lead to a good product. But again, being that I have no substantial proof of that, it's really hard to say that this is truly the case. So this is, again, just something I'm theorizing. I could be completely wrong here. So. Also, if Dan Harmon is leading a lot of the ideas in the writing room, I could see where most folks think the inappropriate family relation themes may be traced back to him. There was a controversy in 2018 in which a video that Harmon created in 2009 had resurfaced. This was a video spoofing the show Dexter, but having Dan doing inappropriate things to a baby doll. This got folks so outraged that they were actually calling for the cancellation of Rick and Morty. However, Dan apologized for the video and also removed his Twitter account, so Adult Swim considered this grounds to keep the show running. So we could see that Dan does have a pretty sick sense of humor, and this could have slipped into some of the gross ideas that we see in these very uncomfortable Rick and Morty episodes. Though I wouldn't put it past Justin either, who had made webisodes showing really uncomfortable and inappropriate acts between characters in his videos as well. But I will say that Justin never took it too far to show such things with children or between family members or anything like that, at least to my knowledge. So if all of what I had just mentioned is influencing what we see in the show, all I could say is it is no wonder that we are getting the Rick and Morty that we are getting now instead of the one that we once knew. So what does this mean? Is Rick and Morty done for? Will it ever get better? Who's to say? As far as I know, there's still a season 7 in the works, I believe. Rick and Morty hasn't been declared canceled by Adult Swim. In fact, according to comicbook.com, season 6's premiere still gained a whopping 659,000 viewers, making it second place as the most watched non-sport related program on Sundays. However, compared to earlier seasons, viewership had declined compared to past seasons that would normally gain up to at least 2 million viewers. The site says that this could be due to streaming services pushing viewers away, and perhaps, but I think it's not the central reason, as you could still watch Rick and Morty on HBO Max. But the fact it still has a good amount of viewers is still promising and means we can look forward to more seasons as long as the views keep coming. As for quality, I can't say. So far, not many people have contested the quality of Rick and Morty. If so, maybe just a few have, including myself. And if that is the case, what are the writers and creators to care? I mean, as long as they have the views, they'll just keep things going the way they're going. Hopefully not to the point that the views decline significantly to finally give them the hint that things aren't so great. And by then, it could be too late to fix the issues. All I know is if or when season 7 comes out, I'll still watch it, hoping it will be better than the season that just passed, but will I jump to watch it the moment it airs like I did with the past seasons, including season 6? Probably not. After watching season 6, probably not. Unless the show gives me reason to have that desire to watch more, not just, let me watch Rick and Morty and pray that this will be a good one tonight and not a one. But let me know what you guys think. Am I being too critical, or do you guys actually feel the same way? Is the show not what it used to be, or do you guys still enjoy it for what it is? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and if you enjoyed my take on the show, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and peace out.